There's a lot going on in the world right now. I feel like the news is like dropping into the iciest refrozen mogul field. We're left with bad news, but never any way to understand why something has happened or how we can have an impact. Once a month, we're going to follow up on the headlines that momentarily captivated our outdoor community, but the rest of the media was too busy to follow up on. Our new series, And Then What, runs after the show across all episodes for about a month. Tune in or not, but it's here if you need it. Hello, it's Fitz. I hope the incredible spring weather we are having right now is finding you wherever you are. It is so nice out. And it's kind of hard to be in this booth right now when it's like this nice. But perfect weather aside, I am still very grateful to be here right now working on the show. Because like a lot of you know that about a year ago, Becca and I weren't totally sure whether we'd be able to keep this show going. As a business, it felt like the floor seemed to drop out from underneath us in the end of 2023 and the beginning of 2024. All these big shifts in the internet, the economy, and the outdoor industry, they all happened right at once. And fortunately, we kind of saw it coming a little bit. So we weren't caught totally flat-footed. And even more importantly, the community stepped up through Diaries Plus to power the show through membership. And that meant that we get to keep trying. We get to keep trying to make this work. And that's been awesome. But that said, it was not a fun period to go through. Like, I have this very vivid memory from December of 2023. We had our team in town, like everyone who works on the show, everyone who works at Duct Tape and Beer. And, you know, we do this once, twice a year. And Becca and I always try and make everyone dinner at our house. Like, we've done it for years. And so I'm there, you know, getting dinner ready. People are going to arrive in like 45 minutes. And I'm like thinking all this through. And how's this going to work? It's really going south at this point. And like Becca and I are trying so hard to fix it, so hard. We're like using our savings and our brains and our spirits to do this. And all these people that we really appreciate and enjoy, they're so creative, they're so kind, and we get to work with them every day. We appreciate them so much. They're coming over to our house. I'm prepping, I'm cutting the vegetables, watching what's on the stove, and my heart starts to hurt. Like, there is a physical pain in my chest. And I'm like, am I having a heart attack? Do I need to call 911? What is happening? And then I stop and I like sort of shake my head because it's like, it's so cliched because like in this moment I realize like, you're not having a heart attack, dude. This is like what someone would describe as a panic attack. You're having a moment. And I was imagining my life without the diaries, without this project, which I've dedicated so much of my life to. Like, I've done this for 18 years. Started in my 20s. I'm in my 40s now. I've gone through several chapters of my life. You know, and I believe that people are a sum of actions, right? And ultimately, what we do with our time on this planet, it kind of gives us shape. And so there's this question, if I don't get to do this anymore, the thing that I've done most days for 18 years, who am I? And it would be almost impossible not to have some of that crept into how I see myself, into my identity, how I, you know, find value, right? And I've been this person for 2 decades that's just been able to figure it out for the small, mighty storytelling project. And what did it mean when I couldn't figure it out anymore? Fortunately, I'm still here talking to you, and that's great. But over the last year and a half, I've had to chew on the question, have we struggled to keep this all going? What happens when the things that give a person purpose, meaning, and joy are no longer a part of their path? This is a really human feeling. And today's story cuts right to the depth of it. What do you do when the pursuit and talents you're known for are no longer accessible? How do you let go so you can rebuild? We've got a lot of ground to cover, quite literally. I'm Fitz Cahal. You're listening to the Dirtbag Diaries. Now, I'm going to go get outside for a little bit. Thanks.
I'm Jason Hardrath. I am an elementary PE teacher in Bonanza, Oregon. I live in Klamath Falls, but I teach out in Bonanza, out in the middle of nowhere in Southern Oregon.
Do the kids call you Mr. Hardrath?
I go by Mr. H. I made that decision my first year of teaching because it's kind of fun and hip and easier to pronounce than Hardrath.
Mr. H, mild-mannered elementary school PE teacher. I think of dodgeball and helping kiddos with scraped knees. I think of never-ending patience and the shrill of a whistle. I've heard Jason Hardrath referred to by another surname, Mr. FKT. Fastest known times. If for some reason you've never heard of FKTs and the community that's grown around them, I'm going to fill you in for a second. The concept of FKTs loosely came out of the climbing community, where informal times on routes like Mount Rainier or the Nose on El Cap became a thing, where people would compete to lower and lower the times it would take to complete these routes. They began to flourish in the endurance and running community. It was like a race without race day and other runners. Pick a route, pick a day, set a time, hopefully beat a time. In the early 2000s, Buzz Burrell popularized the term, and with a bunch of other volunteers started a website known as fastestknowntime.com, where people could enter new routes and log successful attempts. The proliferation of GPS tracking made it easy to document. The whole thing gained momentum, and Mr. H, or Jason, was at the center of the movement. At one point, he held the most FKTs on the site. When COVID hit, races were canceled, and suddenly, if you were a competitive endurance athlete, this was where the action was. And Jason was the person everyone was chasing. I've heard you say that you don't think you're a talented runner or athlete.
I was an underdog high schooler who had to train year round just to hold my varsity spots.
In high school, he ran 30 to 50 miles a week in the hopes of getting a cross-country scholarship to college.
I was the most underpowered person on my college team, just fighting tooth and nail to hold on to my scholarship positions. We would do repeats on the local college hill, and the coach would be like, all right, we need to get down to our recovery heart rates. And he'd start naming names, Search, 134, Snell, 122, Beeson, 134, Hardrath, 178, coach. Don't worry about it. Let's just hit it. And I would just always be getting myself worked by these other guys. So it's this constant fiery crucible of sort of forging my body and my spirit into, okay, I'm going to live in a state of sufferfest to achieve what I want to achieve. And I'm willing to put myself through whatever amount of work is necessary to see myself moving toward my goals.
After college, he kept the momentum going by competing in big triathlons and Ironmans.
And I know I love these big, audacious physical challenges and manifest the things I imagine that are possible.
Jason leaned into the pain, pushing through it until he could do longer and longer efforts. He became fascinated by what his body and mind could do.
As I stepped into Ironman and the ultra running world, I can remember I did my first 100K, and I was dizzy and on the edge of vomiting with my vision narrowing 11 miles into this 62-mile run. And I just couldn't let myself quit. It's I'm going to find out, either I exit through the finish line or they pull me off this course medically. Those are my two options. That's the experiment we're running here, not, I don't feel like continuing. And went through the remaining 49 miles out the finish line. It's okay, so clearly this mark we have in our head of where we can't go any further and what's actually physically possible is at least 49 miles different.
In 2015, Jason was in a car accident where he was ejected from the vehicle. He broke his shoulder, suffered a collapsed lung, and tore his ACL along with various internal injuries. That took him from logging hundreds of miles a day on a bike to needing someone to help him with the most basic things, like getting a glass of water.
My agreement with myself there as I came back on the road to recovery from those injuries was, I'm not going to relent until I get back to some version of what I love.
While competitive competitions and triathlons may have been behind him, rock climbing filled a gap and opened a whole new world of terrain to explore.
I want to rock climb specifically in a way that sets me up to be able to free solo in the high mountains so that I don't need ropes and partners and gear for some of these cool high alpine link ups, and bringing that sort of a mindset there as well, and spending years refining that, the strength and the skill and the balance to be able to trust myself to perform the necessary moves competently and capably over long hours in the mountains. My ADHD mind is normally all over the place and really noisy, and when I'm out moving hard and difficult terrain, my headspace is quiet. It's more a sanctuary than any church I've ever stood in. It's this quiet, beautiful, serene experience with nature.
And that's the moment Jason found out about the concept of fastest known times.
It was like, why would I not want 100 iterations of that, 100 memories of that? And then also it's like this cool, silly checklist, right? Like big round numbers amuse us as human beings for some reason. So why not 100? It was kind of an outrageous, out there goal, but it set me on a path.
"100 FKTs, Shasta, the Crater Lake Rim, Yosemite Valley Loop. The tick list grew quickly."
The Cascade Trifecta was a really big one that was significant for me. Climbing Rainier, Adams, and Hood all in the same day. You watch sunrise as you're going up Rainier, and beg Adams in the middle of the day, and then you're watching the sunset as you summit out on Mount Hood. The Rainier Infinity Loop was another really huge one that I did 10 days after I did the Cascade Trifecta. Those are probably the first two things within my FKT pursuits that drew any sort of attention within the outdoor mountaineering FKT world, that people it turned their heads and they went, who's this guy and what's he up to? That just started a path of chasing bigger and bigger mountain link-ups and infinity loops on other peaks here in the US and eventually overseas. I was the first person to notch 100 of them.
But perhaps the thing that Jason is most well known for:
climbing Washington's 100 tallest peaks, the Bulgers list, in 50 days, something nobody else had even tried to do in a season at the time. And it felt just kind of like this cool contribution to Pacific Northwest mountain culture to be like, hey, these can be done in the same style as they're doing the Colorado 14ers over there in Colorado. And it's been cool to see that since then, 5 different people have done the Bulgers in a season now.
I feel like you did open the floodgates in the season for the Bulger list. Like, you did it, and then it was like, it seemed like almost every year since then, like, there's been like 2 people a year, 2 parties a year that kind of help make that leap for the whole community. I was flipping through your FKTs to prep for this, and I noticed that there were times where some of your most, physically intense attempts at FKTs, like the Rainier Infinity Loop, which is climbing Rainier, then descending the other side, then running the Wonderland Trail halfway, and then climbing and descending Rainier again and running the other half of the Wonderland the other way. And you might have done that 10 days after you did something completely badass too. And a lot of that goes against the grain of how we think about rest and endurance and training peaks. And I'm curious, like, what made you so good at it? What was it? Some sort of mental preparation, or was it a genetic disposition towards this sort of ultra endurance?
I'm definitely not genetically any sort of an elite athlete. I do think my dad and mom gave me good blue collar genetics where I can do a lot of hard work. I'm not going to jump the highest. I'm not going to sprint the fastest, but I can absolutely abuse myself all day long. And yeah, I'll wake up sore and beat up the next day. But then if I go, okay, body, let's do it again, it does it again. I put myself through the fiery crucible of always taking on the most audacious challenge.
5 years after a car accident that took him from biking a casual 140 miles in a day to not being able to walk, he was back at the top of his game, making strides in the world of endurance pursuits. And then he got COVID.
As far as like where I caught it or how I caught it, no. It was after I finished the Washington Bulgers. So my body was kind of fatigued, and then I ended up with it. And that was kind of the first notch in the belt, so to speak, as far as it affecting my ability to recover and perform at the level I was accustomed to. I've had it four times in total that I'm aware of. being a school teacher, you get exposed to a lot of stuff. And then when you're traveling as well, you can get exposed to quite a bit of stuff. A lot of it is that I work with little germ factories every day that want to come up and snot all over me to express their love. So that's just a part of the game I play.
But for Jason, COVID hit harder than an average cold or flu.
The burning sensation in the lungs and the elevated heart rate. I would say the worst time I had it was the third time I had it. I'm not a person that goes to the hospital. I'm one of those guys that's just like, unless a bone is like broken, probably not going to go in and see a doctor. And I remember laying in bed, watching my resting heart rate be at 108, and just every breath, just this burning sensation deep in my lungs, and like the headache and the nausea. And I'm just laying there going, okay, at what point do I let myself go into the hospital? Like, I guess this is something I need to decide for myself, because do I just lay here and let myself die? Because that's not a good option. What are my cutoffs? Because my resting heart rate at the time was like in the 50s, and here I am like doubling that, just laying in bed. And finally I'm like, okay, if as I'm laying in bed it goes over 110, I'll go to the emergency room. And then it just stayed in 108, 107, 106. And I was like, all right, I guess I'm not going in. But yeah, it's a different beast than other diseases for sure.
Did you start to see the impacts on your running right away after that first one, or on your cardio, climbing endurance?
Yeah, even after the first one, it was a notch down, and there wasn't a lot of knowledge on how quickly you should come back. And I'm obviously a person that if I want to do the Rainier Infinity Loop 10 days after I do the Cascade Trifecta because I'm stoked and the route's in condition, then I'm going to be the kind of person that 10 days after I'm done being sick, I want to hop back in and hit it full throttle as well. I definitely hit it too hard too soon, and I could notice the setback of where my heart rate was at any given effort level, and just seeing all of these metrics not line up the way they used to, and it didn't feel right.
This was 2021, and while long COVID had been identified, the extent of how many people it affected hadn't quite hit home. For Jason, something was off. This was not the regular kind of enduring and pain he was used to.
I just ache all through my body at a distracting level where if I'm not focused on something else, it's what will fill my frame of mind, is just how much my body hurts.
Then there was the brain fog, the fuzziness.
There's all the time people who were even significant people in my life that I'm like, what the hell is their name? Why can I not remember this stuff that used to just be easy, that would come up instantly? Whole sections of memory. And that's one of the really tough things, because I've put very little value in my life on having nice things, and I've put all of my money and time and attention into creating crazy experiences and memories and building these incredible memories in beautiful places, to suddenly be like, man, I don't remember that, like hardly any of that adventure anymore. I don't remember 2011 trip to biking across the US through Montana. It's gone. I can remember that I did it, but where are those memories that used to be full and rich?
Jason's MO had always been to keep pushing until he got to the place where his body could perform to the level he demanded of it. Do something big, get up, hurt, do it again, keep going. It became an identity.
And I've spent all of these years cultivating this mindset, because when you do huge day-long efforts and sleep for 2 or 3 hours, if that, and then get up and get moving again and move all day long through difficult terrain, like you build a really resilient mindset to just handle whatever pain feedback your body's giving you, whatever fatigue feedback your body is giving you, like managing that in a really clear, clean, concise way that keeps you on the positive end of your mentality. And I think that sort of blinded me to some of the deterioration process, because I would just sort of drop into the pain cave, drop into the mindset, like, I've spent my life here, whatever, like, I'll bounce back eventually. And so just kind of kept leaning into the discomfort of it until finally one day I realized I was going out for what should have been an easy and enjoyable 45-minute run. And by like 15 minutes into it, I was mentally grimacing in the way I wouldn't need to until I was at like mile 70 of a 100-miler or something, just to like push through this simple workout. And I'm like, whoa, how did I get here? Who is this guy? Like, who is this? What is this body that I'm in now? This doesn't map to any of the previous experiences I've had with myself.
From weekend family rides to quick after-work hits with friends, this is the time of year when our bike rack is constantly in motion and on the truck doing the hard work. Kuat's Piston Pro X has some rad features that make it a really unique hitch rack. Integrated LED taillights, that's sweet. The pneumatic tire arms that hug your tires and not the bike frame. That's really good for your bike. And Kashima-coated struts add durability and a little extra pizzazz. And you won't need any adapters or tools to fit it for small or beefy tires, right? Just squeeze and slide the adjustable wheel chocks to hold 18 to 29-inch tires. Don't have a hitch? The Piston SR has similar features, but easily mounts on most roof crossbars. Find more details on their website, kuat.com. Kuat, because you will absolutely love this rack. Thanks for supporting the show. The Diaries is supported by Oboes. At Oboes, it's all about hiking and the passion for moving your body in nature. Their name Oboes is actually a fun little contraction of outside Bozeman, which is where the team works and creates. They use the mountains as a natural laboratory. While big shoot companies chase volume and trends and gimmicks, Oboes has stayed on trail and on point, refining and building the perfect tools for bipedal travel right in their backyard. If you've got a big summer ahead, check out the Bridger Ridge, their updated take on a classic leather hiker. I've been rocking the Catabatic LT out in the woods. It's a rugged sneaker style built for moving quickly, even when I'm not. Oboes footwear. Love hiking. After trying to muscle his way back to the normal state of fitness, or I should say his normal state of fitness, that had opened up a world of so many experiences, had become a sanctuary, he was realizing that things just weren't going to get better.
Yeah, in a way, this was the first time just through sheer force of will, I couldn't, on the Sunday before my car accident happened, I could bike 140 miles, get off the bike, run 10, and then go play Frisbee with my friends later because I felt great. And I went from that to, on Wednesday, not being able to get my own drink of water, right? Like, snap of the fingers, it happened. It was a very clear, distinct line. The thing that made COVID, I think, so difficult was I didn't even realize I was in the fade for such a long time. And then I'd been in the fade for so long that it took me a long time to realize that I was faced with a question of persevere or pivot. And I just sat there, even though it was like right in front of my face. I couldn't see it. You wait for some way to figure it out. Like, oh, maybe a doctor I talked to or this other athlete that had COVID will have something to say that it's like, oh, take this supplement or do that, and you'll be back. And there was no clear road forward with this. It was like different answers from different people, different information. Finally, it became clear to me as like I was spiraling with these like avoidant behaviors. It would get to be my workout time of the day, and these avoidant behaviors would take over and like almost forcefully compulsively make me waste the time I should be working out. As I finally started to acknowledge that what was happening physically and medically to me was significant, and that might mean that I need to let go of the identity and the hopes and the dreams and the life path that I could see out in front of me that gave me so much direction and purpose. I'd built my whole life around sort of this like inspiration through exceptionalism. One of the things I used to derive pleasure from as a kid running around my hometown was that people in this little town who, aren't physically active or runners would be like, oh, you're crazy. I was doing errands on this side of town and you were there running. And then I drove all the way to the other side of town and did some errands. And then you were there running too. It's like, you ran around the whole town like you're crazy. Or out running in a snowstorm. It was 5 degrees out and I saw you out there. You're crazy. And so like I loved it when what I was doing was inspiring people and rocking their inner world of what they thought was possible or normal. And so that gave me a lot of direction throughout my whole life. And to suddenly like be like, oh, I can't be exceptional anymore. That might be off the docket. And I knew it was something I would have to face at some point in life, like that the speedometer always eventually slows down. But I didn't expect it to start at 34 years old. I thought, okay, I've got like 5 more years until I'm near my 40s, and then I'll start to have to figure out what I want to do instead of chasing these big, crazy, audacious goals. One of my friends calls it being in the swamps, being in the fog. And you're just like navigating this foggy swamp where you're wading ankle deep in the muck and it's uncomfortable and it's cold. And every time you try to get your bearings by looking around, that would give you some sense of purpose or direction with why you're, slogging through the mud. You can't see a thing. It's sort of a liminal space that a lot of people went through during the COVID times where everything shut down and business got altered and everybody was trying to find how to make sense of it all. And it took me a while to finally acknowledge and realize that I can't be the Jason Hardrath that I've been for all these years that I loved being. I loved being that guy. I wanted to keep being that guy for every second I possibly could. I wanted to take on bigger and bigger, endlessly bigger, audacious goals. And to go, okay, that might not be possible, but then who do I want to be and how do I still make sense and find meaning within the trajectory and current place of my life? And that was a big emotional and mental challenge.
It's been 5 years since the pandemic began, and researchers are still in the early stages of understanding the impacts of long COVID. It manifests in different ways for different people. The symptoms are so diverse, everything from long-term loss of smell, chronic fatigue, pain, anxiety, depression, insomnia, brain fog, heart palpitations, and chest pains. The impacts are life-changing. This winter, the CDC estimated that about 20 million Americans are out there suffering from long COVID. We've heard from listeners about how it's reshaped their passions, their careers, and that underscores a reality that might be easy to forget. Long COVID is also isolating, particularly if your friends, your social world, your entire personal life is based upon getting your body moving out in the mountains with friends.
In endurance sports, there's that history and expectation of like, oh yeah, it's the sport you can do until you're much older. Like you can push it until you're in your 40s and your 50s and still be out finishing these big races in your 60s and 70s. And me feeling like here I am in my 30s and I've already lost a huge beat. Yeah, there was this sense of isolation that, even if it was internally created, that I wasn't sort of allowed to participate in the same way I used to and have the same connections that I used to, and that my value to the community was gone. The moment I don't feel like I have something valuable, I start to feel out of place and feel anxiety and feel, does anyone care? Do I belong, or do people still want me here if I can't give anything? And it definitely felt like I didn't have anything to give anymore. Like, I don't have a cool story to tell. I didn't do a rad FKT this year. I don't have something huge on the horizon that's going to be inspiring to talk about.
Jason had made a career of going through the hard things, of accepting discomfort. And he knew that if he was going to find joy, find learning, find wonder that he'd found in all those FKTs, even the belonging, he was going to have to look elsewhere.
So I was in a dark place and kind of spiraling. And finally I was like, a buddy of mine took up paragliding, and it was something I'd seen an X-Alp video back in like 2016. X-Alps is the big competitive like Super Bowl of paragliding. And back burner in my head, I was like, that looks sick. I want to take up paragliding when my knees start hurting on the downhill. Like future Jason can pick that up. Right now, I love just doing it all on foot. But yeah, future Jason can do that. And I was like, all right, my buddy took it up. I always said I would do it like, here's my pivot. I'm going to start paragliding. Something that's not endurance based. It's not based in my physical strength. Like, it's just a skill set I can acquire and execute that gives me a sense of growth and a new sense of community that's not dependent on me being able to cover 100 miles in the mountains and free solo 5-6. And that to me was sort of a big turning point. And that was May of last year that I took my first paragliding lessons.
The hope of feeling that aliveness that comes with moving through mountains motivated Jason. But it was grueling in a different way than he experienced tackling his bigger objectives.
I was in such a depressive and low place that I can remember the act of walking out to the training hill, to get in the car, to drive to the training hill, and then just walking the short distance on the trail to the training hill was sometimes an impossibly overwhelming task. It was like something I had to mentally fortify myself to go do, and to be in a place that was that low, coming from, oh, I'm going to climb 6 peaks today and sleep for 2 hours and go climb 2 more peaks tomorrow, and I'm going to do that for 50 days, to, all right, I got to walk the 480 meters on this trail out to the training hill, and that feeling overwhelming. But then getting out there and like the reward being that it's like, now I get to engage with this new thing I can see and feel growth in. It's just interesting to think back to those first walks out to the training hill and like coming from such sort of a broken place mentally, spiritually, physically, but also seeing the potential within the pivot at the same time.
After about 2 weeks of training and lessons without ever leaving the ground, Jason was ready for takeoff. Do you remember that first flight?
You go to the top of the hill and the coach is like, all right, you're going to do everything we just did for the forward launch, and right about down here, your feet are going to leave the ground. Don't freak out. Just do what we learned. Keep those hands up. You'll fly down, flare at the bottom like we talked about. It'll go great. And you run, you go, the wing comes up, it fills with energy. You feel all of the lines pull against your harness and the harness lift against you. And then finally you go to take that next step and you don't touch down. And you just float. And for me at that moment, it was like, yep, this is going to be a big part of what I'm doing in the future. And I'm going to find ways to integrate this with my love for the mountains and go do some audacious, cool things. If I can recover my physical fitness and endurance and all that enough, like maybe those will be like crazy mixes of on-foot mountain climbing and paragliding off to the next peak before climbing it. Or maybe it'll just be that I can hike up stuff and fly off of it. And whether it's extreme variations or it's more pedestrian variations, like this is something I'm absolutely going to do.
Did it feel like all of a sudden the fog had kind of lifted and you actually could see a path out of that low point spiritually and physically?
I would say it's not like the fog lifted, but it's like I got a brief clearing through the fog where I could at least see some kind of a landmark. It's like, there's something there. I don't know what, and I don't know how far it is, and I don't know exactly how I'm going to get there, but there's at least something out there. And it gave me some amount of a direction. And then it felt like I was wading through the swamps in the fog quite a while longer. And, to some degrees, I still have intermittent bouts where I'm still trying to sort what it all means and where I'm going and what values I want to make decisions based on, as we all do. But the paragliding, it very much felt like, here's a creative brush that I can paint myself into reality with. And I can do it regardless of whether I physically bounce back any more than I am currently, or if this is it. Like, I can still go do these things in this new domain.
Jason made his way through the beginner and novice certifications and is now a P3 or an intermediate level. Just like with climbing and mountaineering, it's given him a new lens through which to see the world.
You're piloting a craft through the air, like an invisible river. And air is doing all sorts of crazy stuff that we as ground dwellers don't ever think about. We don't stop and pause and be like, oh yeah, the air could be going straight up at 20 miles an hour over here, and it could be going down at 20 miles an hour over there. And we just notice the breeze going between those 2 points and think, oh, the wind is blowing. But really, it's moving in all the dimensions, and it could be doing so violently, or it could be doing so very calmly. You can look up and notice the birds spiraling up until they disappear into the sky. Like, you start to notice all these things about this medium that you just sort of ignore and take for granted. You breathe it every day, and you walk through it every day, and you feel the breeze on your skin, but you don't think like, oh, what does that mean? How would I use that to get from point A to point B, or potentially fly over 100 miles, as some people do, all just riding that solar power of the wind? And the ability to sort of learn and grasp those concepts and put together this mental model independent of the physical process was gratifying as well. Just to be able to walk out and feel the breeze and be like, oh, that was a thermal triggering. There's air going up behind me.
In classic Jason fashion, he's out there getting after it, traveling around the U.S. and internationally to fly off peaks and volcanoes. Mountaineering meets paragliding. Last fall, he paraglided off the top of Mount Hood.
That's just a stepping stone. Like, there's a lot more. This rabbit hole goes way deeper, because I know where this rabbit hole goes in the normal mountaineering world.
Medically, Jason is still working on finding answers. He still has big goals that require big energy.
Your general practitioners are just going to look at you and shrug and be like, there's not really anything I can prescribe you or do for you. There are some people you can connect with that dive a little deeper into, like getting blood work done and looking at like the activity of the endocrine system and what's going on there. I worked with this gal for a while who had me try out some peptides and things, and some of those did create little breakthroughs for me.
It underscores a point. There's so many unknowns. And in a way, medical professionals, infectious disease experts, and the people who are living with long COVID are all doing their best to figure out how to treat it. Some medications work for symptoms, but not the underlying illness. Jason's worked on his diet, removing and adding foods, experimental peptide treatments. The treatment of long COVID will be a long, slow process.
I mean, there's so many different ways this disease is sort of shown to affect people, whether it's neurological or at the mitochondrial level, or damages to the gut, damages to the brain, damages to the heart, effects to the blood. So there's all these different trees to bark up as far as what specifically is at the root.
He's also working on slowing down and not doing too much too fast, working with his body on managing the pain and not always pushing through it.
Not that long ago, my late 20s, early 30s, I'm 36 now, and I'm just like, damn, that guy really got after it. Like, that's crazy what he was doing. And it's weird that that's so close, but it almost feels like he was a whole different guy, a whole different beast, an absolute animal doing stuff. And I'm just like casually going through and being like, well, I guess I'll go get a lap up the hill. And it's like, man, who is this guy? So yeah, those are kind of like the long-term things I'm still figuring out. And I had enough bouts where I thought, oh, I'm better, I'm going to lean back into training really hard, that it's sort of difficult to have that sense of trust, because those would always go sideways. It would be like I'd get 2 days of like good training in, and then stuff would spiral back into just like depression and body pain and just the amalgamation of issues I've described, where my head wasn't working right, my mood wasn't right, my body wasn't right. And so I'm trying to intentionally let myself take it slow, which is not something I necessarily do well.
He's still pushing in his own way, searching for the answers, new kinds of objectives, and a way to engage with the mountains that brings him back to the state of peace with himself and nature.
And so, yeah, it's still a bit of a process. I'm still kind of figuring out this relationship with myself. And I'm hoping that I can get back to some amount of pushing toward things again. But I also don't want to try to force it too soon, just because I did push myself deep into a pretty dark place by trying to continue to force things when my body was clearly sending me signals that it was making it worse and worse. I have some new dreams on the horizon that are motivating, mixing mountains and paragliding together in some cool, bigger mission styles. And I would like to start feeling like I'm taking strides toward those. So, yeah, it's an interesting thing to navigate. It's a delicate balance.
Thanks, Jason, for sharing your story and journey. Like I said earlier, we know that there are people in our Diaries community who are going through similar experiences, and we've included a few links in the show notes for resources. Our stories come from friends of friends, and you, our community. If you've got an idea for a show, please give us a shout by filling out the form on our website, dirtbagdiaries.com. Thanks to all the Diaries Plus members who power the show and pay it forward so that these stories can continue to connect, inspire, challenge, and make the community think. You're making open access possible and creating more stories for everyone. So thank you from all of us here. Thank you. If you aren't a member, please consider joining today. Link is in the show notes. Be a part of the Type 2 fun. Be a part of the future. Music today by Cold Storage Percussion Unit and Brendan O'Connell. Our theme song is from Jacob Bain and Mies Cotto. You can find the links to the artists on our website. Today's episode was produced by me and Laura Zaza, with editing and sound design by Andrew Burton. Artwork by my brother, Walker Cahal. Our executive producer is Becca Cahal. I'm Fitz Cahal. You've been listening to the Dirtbag Diaries.